We are diving straight into the paper, introducing Vision ARC, or VARC. This is a pretty fundamental shift in how people are tackling the Abstraction and Reasoning Corpus, the ARC benchmark.
It really is. The core idea is, honestly, it's brilliant in its simplicity. For years, the default was to convert these visual puzzles into text tokens for an LLM. VARC just asks, why?
Yeah.
Why not treat it as what it is?
An image problem.
Exactly, an image-to-image translation problem. Think of it like semantic segmentation, a classic computer vision task.
And that shift in perspective led to some pretty wild results. We're talking about a small vision transformer, just 18 million parameters, trained only on ARC data, and it hits 54.5% accuracy on ARC1.
Which blows past other methods trained from scratch.
Yeah.
But then they push it. With an ensemble, VARC gets up to 60.4%.
Okay, and that number is the headline.
That's the headline, because the reported average human performance on this is 60.2%. So we're talking about a tiny model achieving human parity on a core abstract reasoning test.
Without needing to be pre-trained on, the entire internet.
Right. It's all about the approach. So, okay, let's unpack this. The whole point of the ARC benchmark is to test what we call fluid intelligence. It's about learning totally new concepts from just a handful of examples.
The ultimate few-shot generalization test, really.
Totally. The setup is few-shot, many-task. For every new puzzle, the model gets maybe 2 to 4 demonstration pairs, an input grid, an output grid, and from that, it has to figure out the secret rule.
And these grids are small, max 30 by 30, with just 10 colors, but the rules can be really abstract.
And this is where, for a long time, research got kind of stuck in a rut. The puzzles are all about visual, physical ideas, things like symmetry, rotation, even a kind of simple gravity.
But everyone was just turning them into a long string of text tokens.
Exactly. And feeding them to a giant LLM, hoping that its general world knowledge would somehow transfer to these abstract geometric puzzles. The VARC just flips that entirely.
They're saying, look, if the rule is about reflecting an object, shouldn't a model that's built to understand 2D space, like a vision transformer, have a massive advantage?
It's all about structural bias. You don't need to know about Shakespeare to solve a visual symmetry puzzle. You need visual intelligence.
So, okay, the idea is simple. Treat it like an image. But how do you actually get a VIT to process these weird, blocky little grids effectively? It's not like feeding it a photograph.
Right, and that's the first clever bit of engineering. It's this concept they call the canvas.
The canvas.
Yeah. So ARC grids have all these different sizes, right? 5 by 5, 12 by 18, whatever. They standardize this by taking the input grid and just placing it onto a larger fixed size canvas, usually something like 64 by 64.
And the rest is just filled in with a background color.
Yep. But it's so much more than just padding. It completely changes the information the VIT sees.
How so?
Well, think about a VIT's patch, a little 2 by 2 square. On the original grid, that patch probably just sees one color. The model learns, okay, this is red or this is blue. It encourages memorization.
But on the bigger canvas.
On the canvas, that same 2 by 2 patch might now have a bit of the object's color and a bit of the new background color. So it's not just learning a color, it's learning a relationship, a texture, an edge. It forces the model to learn actual spatial priors.
Okay, that makes total sense. And that canvas is the foundation for all the data augmentation they do, which the paper shows was just crucial for generalization.
Absolutely crucial.
So let's talk about the first one, translation augmentation. This seems pretty straightforward.
It is, but it's important. It just means they randomly place that little grid somewhere on the big canvas. Top left, bottom right, doesn't matter.
Which stops the model from learning location biases. It has to learn the rule, find the biggest shape, not find the biggest shape in the top left corner.
Exactly. And that alone gave them a nearly 3-point boost. But the real game changer was scale augmentation.
Yeah, that one was huge.
So for this, they randomly resized the input grid before placing it on the canvas. Just simple pixel duplication, like nearest neighbor interpolation. This one augmentation provided a massive jump of 6.2 points in accuracy.
Wow. Why was scaling so much more impactful?
It's because of how vision transformers work. Unlike old-school convolutional networks, VITs don't have a built-in bias for scale invariance. A CNN sees a cat, it knows a bigger cat is still a cat. A VIT needs to be taught that more explicitly.
I see. And since ARC rules can involve scaling objects, you have to show the model the same rule at different scales for it to generalize properly.
Precisely. So they sorted out the data. But there was another architectural detail that was super important for making the VIT think in 2D.
You're talking about the positional embeddings.
Yep. The standard VIT approach is to flatten the image into a 1D sequence of patches. But that loses the 2D grid structure. So they used what are called separable 2D positional embeddings.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice?
It's pretty simple, actually. Instead of one big number to say where a patch is, they use two smaller ones. Half the embedding channels encode the horizontal position, the x-coordinate, and the other half encode the vertical, the y-coordinate.
So you're explicitly telling the model, you are at position XY on a grid.
You got it. And that was measurably better than the 1D approach. It's all these little vision-centric tricks coming together.
And it wasn't just VITs. They showed that even a classic UNet, a convolutional network, could get up to 48.3% accuracy. It really validates the whole approach.
Totally. The vision-first idea is sound, regardless of the specific architecture. So that brings us to how they actually train this thing, which is a really cool two-stage process.
Right. You have offline training and then test time training.
So offline training is what you'd expect. You train one big model on all 400 tasks from the ARC training set. But the key here is that they also use the RE-ARC dataset,
Which is an augmented version of ARC.
a massively augmented version. It gave them about 400,000 training pairs. And their scaling analysis shows this was critical. Without that extra data, accuracy was down around 31%. With it, they got up to that 54% number.
So even for abstract reasoning, more diverse data helps build a stronger foundation.
For sure. But then comes the really interesting part for generalization. Test time training, or TTT. This is what happens when the model sees a brand new puzzle it's never encountered.
And all it has are those 2 or 3 demo pairs for the new task.
That's it. So for each new task, it takes the pre-trained model and fine-tunes it for about 100 epochs, using only that tiny handful of examples. And they augment that handful like crazy flips, rotations, color changes to create about 50 little auxiliary tasks on the fly.
The paper has a great visualization of this. You see, the model's first prediction is just a mess. But as the TTT epochs tick by, it refines and refines until, bang, it snaps into the correct, detailed output.
It's like it's tuning its focus for that one specific problem. But here's a fascinating detail they found. An ablation study on how you do the TTT.
You mean doing it for each task separately versus all at once?
Exactly. They found that performing TTT independently for each new task was way better, by about 10 accuracy points, than trying to fine-tune jointly across all the new test tasks.
Wait, that feels really counterintuitive. Wouldn't you want the model to see the context of all the new problems together?
You'd think so. But the hypothesis is that joint TTT leads to catastrophic forgetting. The model tries to learn 100 new different things at once, and in the process, it overwrites the powerful general rules it learned during that big offline training phase.
I see. So by keeping the TTT separate, you preserve that core knowledge and just tweak it for the task at hand.
That seems to be the idea. So after TTT's done, we get to inference. And to squeeze out every last drop of performance, they used a pretty standard vision technique, multi-view inference.
And when you say multi-view, you mean a lot of views.
Yeah, a lot. They essentially generate 510 random views of the test input by messing with the scale and translation augmentations, and then they have the model vote on the most likely output pixel by pixel.
Okay, hold on. 510 views, doesn't that kind of, I don't know, feel like you're brute forcing it? If the model needs 500 guesses, did it really learn the rule?
That's a totally fair question, and it really highlights how brutal the ARC metric is. The main metric here is pass at 1. That means your very first single prediction has to be 100% pixel perfect. One wrong pixel, and you fail the entire task.
Ah, okay. So it's incredibly strict.
Incredibly. So the multi-view voting is really a strategy to combat that brittleness. The model's core reasoning might be right, but it might make a tiny execution error. Voting across many views smooths out those errors and dramatically increases the chance of hitting that one perfect grid. It took them from about 36% pass at 1 to nearly 50%.
That's a huge boost just from a post-processing step. So when we look at the final numbers, that single 18 million parameter model at 54.5% is it's really impressive because it was trained from scratch.
And that's what makes it so compelling. It's an efficient, focused solution that beats out other more complex models that were also trained only on ARC. And then, of course, the ensemble hitting 60.4% and matching human performance is just the cherry on top.
Beyond the numbers, they had some really cool qualitative analysis that shows what the model is actually learning inside.
Right, the TSNE visualization is fascinating. They took the internal task embeddings, the model's idea of each puzzle, and plotted them. And you see this beautiful structure emerge.
All the tasks that are about coloring things cluster together. The ones about logical operations like AND or XOR, they form their own little neighborhood.
Exactly. The model was never told these categories exist. It learned the semantic similarity of the tasks all on its own. That's a huge sign that real abstraction is happening.
And the attention map showed a similar story, right? Different layers were learning to do different things.
Totally. The early layers of the VIT acted a lot like convolutional filters, looking at small 3x3 neighborhoods, finding local patterns.
But then the deeper layers were doing much more complex, non-local operations.
Yeah, they showed attention patterns that looked like the model was drawing lines out from a point in all directions, or finding corresponding pixels on opposite sides of the grid. It's learning these compositional steps needed to solve things like rotation or reflection.
So to wrap this up, what's the big takeaway for a researcher listening to this?
I think it's a powerful validation of a long overlooked idea, that you can, and maybe should, frame abstract reasoning problems as vision-centric, image-to-image tasks.
The lesson seems to be that structural bias is more important than just sheer data scale, at least for this kind of problem.
Absolutely. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. You can try to do it by reading a manual the size of an encyclopedia that describes every possible state. That's the LLM approach. Or you can understand the geometry and mechanics of the cube itself. That's the VARC approach.
So for you, as an AI researcher, this paper is really an invitation to think about the fundamental structure of your problem. Maybe a vision model's the right tool, even if the task doesn't look like a photograph.
For sure. But there's still a challenge ahead. It's an important final point.
The performance gap.
The performance gap. So their multi-view approach got them to 60.4% on pass at 2, but their pass at 300 result, which is like if you give the model 300 chances, was 66.3%.
So there's still a 6-point gap between what's possible and what they achieve with a couple of guesses?
Right. And that gap tells you that the model's fundamental ability to infer the correct rule on a single try still has a lot of room to improve. The next big step won't just be clever voting strategies. It'll be about making that core inference more robust from the very first attempt.